What's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire training courses.
Now everybody understands, or should understand, if something is true, it's true, and no amount of bullshit, nonsense, trolling, shilling can change that. But apparently, as of this month, the FBI has decided that anybody in the United States, American citizen, American veteran, it doesn't make any difference at all. If they have differing opinions on anything, well, they're now considered a domestic terrorism threat.
Now I want to go to this segment by John Bound. The FBI deems conspiracy theorists as the new terrorists.
Recently, an FBI bulletin dated May 30th, 2019, identified conspiracy theory-driven domestic extremists as a terror threat. The bulletin states the FBI assesses these conspiracy theories very likely will emerge, spread, and evolve in the modern information marketplace, occasionally driving both groups and individual extremists to carry out criminal or violent acts. However, the Bureau said another factor driving the mounting threat is the uncovering of real conspiracies, or cover-ups, involving illegal, harmful, or unconstitutional activities by government officials or leading political figures.
As long as you can tell people, if you don't trust everything and anything being said by Fauci and the others, then you're an anti-science, anti-vaxxer, domestic terrorist extremist who needs to be strung from the highest lamppost and blah, blah, blah. And most people will go along with it until there's some stupid child, some idiot, naive little child who says, but he's not wearing any clothes. And that, you know, who's going to be the child?
And what is a suspected domestic terrorist? Well, that's anybody who supports Trump, anybody who is conservative, anybody who opposes, climate change and the COVID fake pandemic or vaccines. They've got a long list. You talk about election corruption, you're there on the list as well. So if you talk about those types of things, or you understand those things, you are a suspected domestic terrorist.
I know there's a lot of people worried about that turning on citizens who are deemed to be, terrorists, and that is a very loose term now.
What's going on in the FBI raid of Rudy Giuliani's apartment and the confiscation of his phones and his laptops and all of his electronic equipment is not prosecution, it's persecution.
I'm a veteran. I'm an American. I was born here. I don't say anything in YouTube videos. I don't tell people to go attack 5G towers. I don't tell people to storm anything whatsoever at all. But right now we're watching the mainstream do that. So here's this reminder. You see this article from 2017 in the military, the Army University Press, time to engage in social media. See this guy, hey, I'm so happy. I was in the Army. And I talk to guys that are still in the DOD. Women too. These guys are on social media, and there's armies of them, and it's not new. It's old news. Do you see what I'm saying? How covert agents infiltrate the internet to manipulate, deceive, and destroy reputations. This goes back to 2014. Dirty tricks, tactics, etc., etc. The Global Guide to State-Sponsored Trolling. All over the world, governments are fashioning digital hate mobs to squelch dissent. This is old. Here's another article right here from 2017. I've shown you this before. At least 30 governments around the world are employing keyboard armies to spread propaganda and attack critics. I would be considered a critic. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you see where I'm going with this? This isn't conspiracy whatsoever at all. This is just the times of Israel. Do you see what I mean? Paid trolls, Netanyahu trying to steal elections, blah, 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 fake news. These guys are the ones that brought all of this stuff up. These are the guys that have backdoors into absolutely everything you use on your computer. It's no joke. $1 million troll army. I bet you $1 million a really low number. But this is what these guys do, and you need to understand it, because information is the new economy.
We're not wearing masks. Why is that? Because we understand microbiology, we understand immunology, and we want strong immune systems. I don't want to hide in my home develop a weak immune system, and then come out and get disease.
Department of Homeland Security, they said, is limited in how it can monitor citizens online without justification. Oh, is it? Oh, you mean because the law says that you will not do domestic surveillance, that the DOJ and Homeland Security and the CIA and the NSA, they don't listen to your conversations? They don't get data from Mr. and Mrs. Verizon, as Rand Paul said, using FISA court, other things like that? Yeah, they want to keep this fantasy up. One of the reasons why they didn't come after James Clapper, it was a very awkward admission.
Does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
It does not.
Not wittingly. There are cases where they could inadvertently, perhaps, collect, but not wittingly.
All right.
And they have. That's why we had the FISA Act, going back to the Church Committee hearings, going back to the Pike Committee hearings, because they were, and they still are. And he was exposed as a liar. He lied under oath. They never came after him for perjury because they want to tamp that down.
Anybody leaving a comment saying we should storm the Vatican, we should do that, there's going to be people, there's going to be videos where they're going to try to get you to do things which will help them. Do you know what I mean? We should storm Walmart. We should tear down 5G towers. If you see anything like that, run away. Get away from that. Anybody that's making any type of moves that are anything of consequence certainly will not be putting them in a YouTube video, in a YouTube comment section, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, or Reddit. But you know who will? These guys, and these guys, and these guys, but more specifically, these guys. And it's strange that the United States of America, the country that gives these guys billions and billions and billions of your dollars, you're not allowed to say anything. These people are basically getting welfare from the United States, but you're not allowed to say one single solitary thing, or your channel will be taken down, or you will be attacked by
Janet Yellen, who is the Department of Treasury, the Secretary of State, or the Attorney General, Garland, to identify people and to deprive them of property. And not only that, but anybody who's associated with them by business or family members or children, to take anything that everybody's got. This is like civil asset forfeiture on steroids, but used for people who are labeled, quote unquote, domestic extremists and terrorists. And we know what that's code for, right?
What kind of a situation in the U.S. would you see that happening?
I mean, we've got a lot of constitutionalists and a lot of people that stockpile weapons, a lot of ammunition. I mean, we've got a lot of constitutionalists and a lot of people that stockpile weapons, a lot of ammunition. They have weapons here locally.
Do you think that's their right to have those, or do you think that that's inappropriate? I mean, because not all those people don't always turn on their government; they don't turn on the cops.
You're dealing with a group of people in the Reagan administration who equated political dissent with treason, and who cannot differentiate between emergency procedures, which I think everyone agrees are necessary, and suppressing political dissent. And with North and Poindexter and Casey, you had a group of people who saw Americans who disagree with them as the enemy.
So now they're talking about a Department of Justice budget that includes an $85 million increase to probe domestic extremists and terrorism. So that's why CNN is writing the article, because they're going to openly pay these people $85 million to become corporate snitches on their political opponents. And again, throughout all the justification of this and all, January 6th, January 6th. Did you hear about January 6th? It's all about January 6th. The Department of Justice has charged more than 400 people about January the 6th. Garland said on Tuesday's hearing, the threat of domestic violent extremism and domestic terrorism keeps him up at night. My oath is to protect the Constitution. Yeah, that gives me my authority. I can do anything. What Constitution? I don't know. I've never seen that thing. And so both forms of terrorism, foreign and domestic, are extraordinary concern to me. We will never take our eyes off of what happened on 9/11 and the risks this country continues to face from foreign terrorist attacks on homeland. Likewise, We have a growing fear of domestic violent extremism. See, I always said Homeland Security was going to be used domestically. That's what it was really about.
So now, anybody like myself that doesn't understand what's going on, at any given moment, at any time, we could be set up, blamed, used for the next staged event. Or the van could show up at any time, day or night, put a hood over your head and take you to Guantanamo or some other area for rendition.
If you listen to the expression cruel and unusual punishment, doesn't that apply?
No,
cruel and unusual punishment.
To the contrary. You think that you would? Has anybody ever referred to torture as punishment? I don't think.
And Americans don't seem to have an issue with that. But it's a real thing. This is 100% real. This happened. And just like I told you back in 2017, this was the engine. This is what spurred it. This is what started it all. That's why I told everyone back then that this was a honeypot. This was a trick. It was a trap.
It's funny. They have 9/11 and now they have 1/6. You had 9/11 to create Homeland Security and the Patriot Act, but at the same time, they created all of the Model State Health Emergency Powers Act. You know, they created this template of legislation, pushed it out to the states and said, here, do this. They practiced it for 20 years annually in simulations run by the CDC and Johns Hopkins. The first one was done just a couple of months before 9/11. Then they had the false flag event of an anthrax attack. Then they pushed the legislation out. They've been practicing this for the longest time. They've been training their bureaucrats to do it. Everybody died because you didn't have draconian enough quarantines and because you didn't push an unapproved experimental vaccine quickly enough. That was every year they trained for that. And they practiced on how to lie to people. And so that's where we are. You go back and you look at how this is all set up. Homeland Security was always for domestic use. 9/11 was always to get to the end game of where we are with this lockdown that happened 417 days ago. They've been preparing for this a long time.
I think they're getting ready to take it to another level in the United States because Canada and other parts of the world are getting locked down while the rest of us are just basically they're waiting to see who's going to get their shot and then who's going to say no. We've got an awful lot of mass shootings happening again. And all you got to do is look at them for a split second and you can tell it's hokum. You know what I mean? You can tell it's complete hokum. The Colorado shooting was ridiculous. Yeah. Absolutely ridiculous. Yep. But they're starting it up again for some reason.
Exactly right. Well, let's give credit. James Evan Pilato has said for years and years and years, for a few presidential selection sideshow circus cycles now, he has said every time Team Pepsi gets into power, it's going to be domestic terrorists and school shootings and that sort of thing. It kicks off, and when it's Team Coke in power, then it's some sort of international terror event or 9/11 or that kind of thing. And it's exactly right. And he called it, as he said, as Biden comes in, he said, it's going to be mass shootings again. And here we are now. Suddenly, mass shootings are a thing, and it's domestic terrorism and all of this. That's the narrative, and they're going to use it to clamp down on anyone who dissents. And there's no doubt about this at this point. Anyone who dissents from the mainstream narrative is going to be classified a domestic terrorist. The entire apparatus and machinery of the war of terror state that was erected in the first couple of decades of the 21st century is going to be wielded against anyone questioning the biosecurity state coming into view. That's what it was really designed for. It was never about catching some turban bearded Muslim person trying to get in. It was about now we have the power to use this against the citizenry, and that's exactly how it's going to be used.
Domestic violence extremism poses heightened threat in 2021. This is coming from the new Director of National Intelligence, and they say it was drafted by the National Counterterrorism Center, the FBI, the CIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and Homeland Security, DHS.
Once they shut your channel down, well, they could show up at any given time under this right here, and you'll be gone. Do you understand what I'm saying? Are you ready for that?
But he's taking these shots, this antagonism, this taunting to the intelligence community.
You take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you.
I'm 51 years old, man. Do I look like I give a fuck anymore? Seriously. Seriously. But I'm warning you. Do not fall down the rabbit hole. And for all the Christians who just went, oh my goodness, Richie just swore. Guess what? Richie prays a lot every day. I can deal with it, believe it or not. But when I see something like this is a game changer. This is a big, big, big deal. And we knew this was coming.
His primary point is this, quote, the IC, the intelligence community, and I just typically refer to the intelligence community. I typically, out of habit, just refer to this collective group of deep state criminals as a CIA. But, you know, technically it's the intelligence community because, as we were reminded by Hillary Clinton when she sold Russiagate, we have 17 intelligence agencies, right? And within each of these intelligence agencies, there are some legitimate functions for defense, but each of them has illegitimate domestic spying as an ever-increasing part of their mission.
Put some things in an area where we're waiting to see where the courts go. Quite obviously, they said if you were going to trespass to install a device, then that requires a warrant. The standard on that warrant is still up in the air. The standard on that warrant is still up in the air.
Their mission creep of these spy creeps. The intelligence community assesses that domestic violence extremists are motivated by a range of ideologies and galvanized by recent political and societal events in the U.S., and they pose an elevated threat to the homeland, to der Fatherland, right? To the fatherland, as the Nazis would say, because that's what this is all patterned after. Glenn Greenwald pointed out, it's all these leftists, environmental activists, and so forth, and they summarize it as those who oppose capitalism, that's the left, and those who oppose all forms of globalism, that's us on the right, if you want to say right. Those of us who support nationalism, who support individual liberty, we're opposed to all forms of globalism. So that makes me a domestic extremist.
But it could be replaced. Could a turret be put back on that?
I suppose you could if we don't have one. If that makes sense.
You don't have one yet.
No, we got rid of it because we don't use it. We don't use it for that.
But if there was ever a need that someone said you needed to now use it, you could replace it up there.
I suppose you could mount whatever you wanted on it, but I mean, that's not the purpose. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this highly concerns me because as a citizen, I'm thinking, why do you need this kind of a vehicle on U.S. soil?
To rescue
and
people.
Putting it out in front of a Walmart to desensitize children that this is okay to be in a world growing up with. You're going to see these more often.
I don't think everybody needs to wear a mask and gloves because it reduces your bacterial flora. It doesn't allow you to interact with society, and your bacteria flora and your viruses, your friends that protect you from other diseases, end up going away, and now you're more likely to get opportunistic infections.
This is a big statement because who defines this? Well, the people that are actually perpetrating are the ones that are now policing. So how can you go wrong? Laws don't apply when you're a lawmaker. Do you see what I'm saying?
Members of the Biden team who have been nominated or have been appointed are now moving in laser-like fashion to try to uncover as much as they can about what looks very similar to insurgency movements that we've seen overseas, where they germinate in different parts of the country and they gain strength, and it brings together an unholy alliance frequently of religious extremists, authoritarians, fascists, bigots, racists, nativists, even libertarians. And unfortunately, I think there has been this momentum that has been generated as a result of, unfortunately, the demagogic rhetoric of people that just departed government, but also those who continue in the halls of Congress. And so I really do think that the law enforcement, Homeland Security, intelligence, and even the defense officials are doing everything possible to root out what seems to be a very, very serious and insidious threat to our democracy and our republic.
The people that think they're awake are rolling with Trump. Trump came in 2017, he's leaving or whatever, but he also brought in fake news. And then Trump caused this to happen where the FBI now has a free hand because they've convinced most of America and most of the world, because this is India today apparently, that Americans that believed in their president, that showed up at the Capitol, and then a bunch of crisis actors and a bunch of idiots broke in. That gives the FBI a free hand to come and collect anybody that's bothering them. Do you see what I'm saying? And that's exactly what they're going to do.
If the feds thought they had a case, the way to pursue that is to issue a subpoena for the specific documents that you want or the specific pieces of equipment that you want. Serve it on Rudy, who is not evading service, and he, of course, would comply. The law requires that, and Rudy would obey that. The way not to do it is to treat him like a drug dealer and bust into his home at 6 in the morning, burst into his house, and steal everything they can lay their hands on. There's only one reason for the FBI to do that, and that is that they don't know what they're after. They're on a fishing trip, and they want to look at all of Rudy's phone calls and emails and texts back and forth with the President of the United States and with a variety of other people so that they could try to find grounds to prosecute him. This is how the Joe Biden Justice Department works and how Joe Biden appeals for national unity.
They have domestic extremists and domestic violent extremists, right? The U.S. security state apparatus regards the agenda of domestic violent extremists as derived from anti-government or anti-authority sentiment. Any opposition to perceived economic, racial, or social hierarchies. So that is an extremist. Anybody that opposes, as Glenn Greenwald summarizes that, anybody who opposes the prevailing ruling class and its system for distributing power, or their narrative, no matter how false it is. If you oppose that, you are a domestic extremist. And then anyone who believes that violence, intimidation, or coercion should be used is a domestic violent extremist.
These guys will either blame something on all of us, they'll set us up one way or the other, or, like I said, in the middle of the night.
I just want you to know, Director Clapper, respectfully, I will be asking this question of you, just like we did with respect to the legal documents for targeted killings, which we finally got.
And anybody else that does this should be ready for that, because they're going to go next level with this. But let's keep going, shall we?
Domestic violent extremist. And as he points out, violence of any kind is already a serious crime, and it is the proper role of government to investigate it and prevent it if possible. But there are real important legal and institutional and constitutional limits on the authority of the intelligence community to involve itself in domestic law enforcement. Do you understand? We're talking about the spies spying on you.
If there was any fear in what I was doing right now, I would stop. And you know why I would stop? Because that's what this article was supposed to do. They can't completely and totally 100% shut us all up, because if they pull the plug on everybody at one time, people might actually stop grazing and look up. So they're doing it slowly. And this is just another in a long line of thinly veiled threats.
And then the FBI kind of focuses in, for some reason, on a lone wolf idea, because the FBI doesn't like conspiracy theories, right? They always want to tie it to one disgruntled person and end it at that, right? Isn't that typically? We've seen this over and over again. It's always a lone wolf.
The same FBI that allowed Waco to happen, that allowed Ruby Ridge to happen, that allowed Whitey Bulger and his pals to kill tens, 20s, I don't know how to say it. Dozens of people were killed so the FBI could use Whitey Bulger to take down the mafia.
Just like they did with Michael Cohen's lawyer. And the goal, as it was with Michael Cohen's lawyer, is to intimidate him and force him to turn on Donald Trump and turn over damaging material. This is partisan. This is the KGB's style and should not be the FBI's style.
These guys now have their reasoning for showing up and arresting people because you've been talking about bad things on the internet. I've been on the internet for over a decade, on YouTube specifically, and I've never seen a YouTube channel that had as many subscribers as myself ever say, let's all get together and go attack something. It's never happened. It's never happened. And yet, according to the headlines, it happens all the time. And now they got to get on it because they're concerned about free speech. Yeah, free speech. fake news, the old okey doke. If you're an American patriot, if you believe in Jesus Christ, you should have no fear whatsoever at all. I'm warning you, do not be deceived by these people, even if you think you know them. If you don't know them, you don't know them. It could be any one of these people at any given time. The amount of people on the other side of what we're trying to do is staggering, honestly. And it's amazing how many channels popped up exactly 11 months ago and are telling people things like chemtrails are from Donald Trump and they're full of kittens and unicorn farts and vitamins and minerals and raviolios. They're not. They're not. It's still the exact same thing that it always was. It's amazing to me that conspiracy theories. Do you really think one bullet hit John F. Kennedy and blew his head all over the place and hit other people? Seriously? At any rate, Richie from Boston, links will be in the description. Share this. And if anything ever occurs, if I decide to be indicted for some ridiculous crime, or I decide to kill myself by shooting myself in the back of the head 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, as we've seen happen, re-upload this. Or don't. I'm out.
So, again, I understand that you guys are seeing different, drawing different conclusions from the same data. Why is that? That's my question.
Because we're actually seeing the patients. Dr. Fauci hasn't seen a patient for 20 years.
Beware those that question the manufactured narrative. The military-industrial complex is watching you. John Baum reporting.
You heard it here first, folks. Tomorrow's News Today, we told you this was coming down the pipe. We warned you about the collusion between big tech and the spy state. We've told you about it all. We've been ridiculed, mocked, and called conspiracy theorists. Now, I guess that means we're being called domestic terrorists, folks. We won't stop telling the truth no matter how they try to demonize us.
And now there's one environmental activist who stepped forward to Wired magazine after she found a GPS which had been placed under her car, courtesy of the feds. According to Wired.com, this method is becoming a very common way for feds to track anyone they deem suspicious or potential threat to our country, depending on if you actually consider environmental activists a threat. But whatever, I'll move on from that one.
I'm Carter Edison. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell icon to be notified of future uploads, and never stop searching for the truth.